Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Elohor Egbordi, and I want to welcome you to Kaduna Book and Arts Festival. With me here is Ms. Bisi Adjapon, author of The Teller of Secrets, one of my favorite books. I'm so excited to meet you. I've loved you from afar for a long time, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I want to talk about the author. Bisi Adjapon is a writer. She's an author. She's been published in the Max Whitney's Quarterly, Al Jazeera, the New York Times, and the Washington Times. She said not to say too much about her.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just going to dive right into it. Some people find their passion early in life. Like, did you always know you wanted to be a writer and author?
Oh, yes. I think I've been telling people all along that being a writer is not when you are published. So if you are writing, any one of you, if you are writing, you're already a writer. So yeah, I was writing when I was a little girl. I've been writing ever since I could remember.
And what inspired Essie's story? Why this particular story?
To be honest with you, I always feel like such a fraud when people ask me that question. I mean, you think that, oh, you hear stories of you sat down and you got an inspiration. For me, it's all a lie. I'll be very honest with you. I wrote this just to show somebody that I could write. I met a stranger at a function, and don't always judge people by their appearances, even though I'm always trying to dress appropriately sometimes. But anyway, this guy was standing there on the stage with torn jeans, on the curb rather, in New York, with torn jeans and messy hair. And you know what we think about such people, right? So I was just making conversation with him because I was waiting for somebody else, very important. And I told him that I was having frustrations with my writing. And he said, oh, I'd like to help you. So he wrote his email on a little piece of paper, gave it to me. I went to my hotel room and I threw it away, to be honest with you. And then after I threw it away, when I was checking out, I went back and retrieved it from the waste paper basket. And so I went home and I thought, okay, I'm just going to write a short story. So I wrote a short story that took me like a couple of days, and then I sent him 3 pages. And to my utter surprise, he said he liked it. And so he asked me, where was the rest of the story? So then I gave the rest of the story to him. And then a week later, he got back in touch with me and said, can we publish it? And I said, who is this person? So I went and Googled him, and not to know that it was Dave Eggers, this really big writer, and Pulitzer Prize winning author. And so that's how I got published. So publication is kind of different from writing, right? Okay.
Thank you so much. That was inspiring. And I read in the draft section of this book where you talked about writing Essie's story in first person, present tense, and you said it didn't come to you any other way. That's the way you described it. Can you tell me more of why it didn't come in any other way to you?
So, to be honest with you, okay, can I say this? I really hate book chats. They're so very formal, and I feel weird sitting on stage with the lights on me and me looking at you all. So I'm going to say, if you feel like it, raise your hand and interrupt me, okay? I'll feel so much better if you interrupt me and get a little less formal. Anyway, where was I? Oh, it's
present tense.
Present tense. Yeah, I mean, I was trying to write, normally a story, you write it in the past tense, right? But I work with kids. I work with kids I used to have a Shakespeare company in the US, and my youngest actress was actually 5 years old, and the oldest was, I think, 16 years old. And I loved it very much. And so for me, getting into the mind of a child, children don't think too far into the future, and they ask a lot of questions. So the question for me was, how could I make it interesting? So imagine that, say, a child sees 2 people doing the horizontal gymnastics in bed, right? and the child wants to know what's going on. I thought it would be interesting for the child to ask herself questions like, why is my father climbing on hotel woman's back like a dog? That's something that is more interesting when a child asks such questions than when an adult goes on intellectually dissecting. So I chose to write it in the voice of a child in the present tense.
Okay, thank you for that. Now I know. And, okay, so not to be a stalker, but I've been following you for a while. And one time you talked about your alma mater, the secondary school you went to, and I realized that's where Essie also went to. And last month, I saw a tweet where you said your favorite food is also Essie's favorite food.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, I saw it.
What is Essie's favorite food?
You said something about, hold on, I wrote it down. Fried yam with spicy grilled grouper and prawns.
Well, it wasn't her favorite. She liked it, but it wasn't her favorite. Her favorite was jollof rice. My favorite is that, yes. So, are you leading to a question with this?
No, I'm just going to say, can you draw more parallels between your life?
I knew you were coming to that. Okay, so the truth of the matter is that geographically, the book is autobiographical. I was living in America. I was too broke to come down to do research. So I wrote about places that I could describe. I believed in, writing exactly as if you were there. So I didn't want to write about places that I couldn't describe well. So I placed her in all the towns that I knew. I placed her in schools that I already knew. I placed her in Nigeria, in Surulere, because I've lived in Surulere. I gave her Nigerian relatives because I have Nigerian relatives and I could describe them, yeah.
Let's talk about themes. One of the things I like the most about this book is the kind of themes you have. You have from serious, maybe not so serious, you talk about grief, family, sex, even taboo subjects such as sex. So I want to ask you, why was it important to delve into these themes in this particular book?
When I was a child, I was a very curious child. I was probably a very annoying child. You know that annoying child that wants to always know why you are doing this and whatever you're doing. If you bring a boyfriend home and you sneak him into the bedroom, she wants to know what's going on. So I was very annoying. And the answer from adults was always, go away. This is not for you. Or adults are children, go away. So because of that, I have a lot of passion for young people, especially little children. And so, yeah, I just thought I should go about it the way, children ask all these difficult questions that adults don't want to answer. So I wanted basically adults to see themselves reflected in the eyes of children, and that is why I did it that way.
Essie is my spirit animal. I just wanted to let you know.
Okay.
And I see so much of myself in her. So it's why I love this book so much. I see a lot of myself in her. I was a very inquisitive child. I read far and wide. If you told me, shush, don't do this, don't do that, I'll do it. Just to see what will happen. For example, the first time my mom said, don't have a boyfriend, you get pregnant. That's why I got a boyfriend. But that's a side note.
Did you get pregnant?
No, I'm here.
Okay. I thought you were going to say I got a boyfriend and I got pregnant.
I didn't get pregnant. That was a lie.
Okay.
Okay. So speaking of taboo subjects, there is one place in the book where Essie is humiliated. She has Ginger put in a private area. Another time where Sister Mansa is beaten by her father for going out with a man.
Spoilers.
Which is ironical. No, I'm not giving a spoiler. But it's ironical because the man was always like, a woman is nothing without her husband. Bring a man home. So why are you beating this one? Why is there a problem? So I think this kind of thing just shows you that the way society sees women, it's like you are respected. It's respectability politics. You are respected if you toe this path. If you don't, then you are shunned. So this kind of thing also makes me think about how Essie was with her father, my best friend in the whole wide world. Can you talk more on respectability politics and why women are seen as beings to be controlled, to be respected only in a certain area if they do something right or wrong?
One of the things that has always bothered me, for instance, let's talk about premarital sex. Now, I was sitting in the audience and I was thinking to myself, ideally, two people who get married, each of them should be virgins. And then the two of them get together and discover sex together. Maybe that will be fine. What I don't like is the fact that it is okay for men to indulge in certain things. And I always ask myself, whose child? Because if every man is supposed to marry a virgin, then whose daughter is going to be the guinea pig for the man? I mean, are there women who are born to just service men and then women who are born for marriage? So it has always bothered me that we have this double standards where men are, for instance, a man doesn't have to get married. And when I say that, it's not that he doesn't have to get married, but if he doesn't get married, nobody wants to hold a stick and say you're a bad person, right? But if you're a woman and you're 40-ish or 50-ish and you're not married, then either the relatives are going to start introducing, oh, come, I have this person. Anytime somebody introduces somebody to me, they always let me know, he's single, you know, and that kind of thing. So that always happens. And so the thing that bothers me, and I'm not knocking marriage. I think marriage is wonderful. I mean, just think how wonderful it is to have a life partner that you share good and bad moments with. I think it's really wonderful. So both gender, you know, whatever gender, if you feel like getting married, fine. But I feel as if women are held to a really, really, I mean, I've heard stories of parents even threatening their daughters if they are not married and that kind of thing. When I was in the US, I would get calls from some strange guy who would clear his throat. I am blah, 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 and Uncle David, which was my father's name, Uncle David wanted me to call you. Yes, what can I do for you? It seems to me as though we have a lot in common and maybe we could get... I would just get very upset about it, you know. So the pressure on women. And the thing that bothers me is that if you put that kind of pressure on a woman, then they end up marrying somebody who's not good for them. Just because marriage is aspirational. And that's the thing. Why marriage should not be aspirational for a woman. If it is aspirational, then you do anything. And by the way, man, that is what happens when maybe a girl gets pregnant by force and comes to you and say, I'm pregnant because hopefully you'll marry me. I actually have a niece who did that, came to me and said, I'm going to tell, she wasn't even pregnant. She said, I'm going to tell him I'm pregnant. That way she'll marry me and he'll marry me. And I said, okay. And then what happens when he finds out that there is no baby? Oh, I'm just going to tell him the baby died, or I had a miscarriage, or something like that. I mean, that is, people are driven to desperation. And we shouldn't do that. And if you're a father, obviously you don't want somebody to abuse your daughter because the person was so desperate as to pick a bad man. So the thing is I think of this girl, is her name Malala? That wonderful girl from Pakistan, and how much her father is so supportive of whatever it is that she does. And she's a good Muslim girl. And you all know about her being shot or something like that because she wanted to go to school. But the father has been very protective of her, and hopefully, you know, she's not going to get into a bad marriage. Did she get married?
Yes,
yes, she did. And that is a wonderful thing to see, because the father did not put pressure on her. And that is what I want to see for women, that nobody should put pressure on anybody just to get married or, you know, that kind of thing. Which is not to say that marriage is not good. It is good. Just let's allow women the same kind of consideration that we give to men.
Thank you so much. Speaking of women, let's talk about Essie's stepmother. So the thing about her is that when I first met her in the book, I was like, this woman though, this woman. And then later on, when she and Essie, they don't become friends. They become friendly. Ish.
They are going to accuse you of spoilers. So
there's no spoiler. Don't worry. You will hate her too. Anyway, so they become friendly-ish. And then myself and other people, maybe, hopefully other people who've read it, start becoming like more, should I say concerned? Or they become more sympathetic towards her character. And I think it's weird because in the beginning I hated her so much. I mean, I didn't still like her, but then I began to understand, like, okay, this is why she did what she did and all of that. What do you think the society can do as a whole to make women more aware of their strengths?
I think education, and we've said it over and over again, I think people have said it today, education. Let's not forget something. The average parent truly cares about his or her child. I don't think that any parent just gets up and think, oh, what a lovely day, I'm just going to beat my child or put Ginger in her privates or do something like that. No. Parents do love their children, but they do what they do. I mean, think about what they do in China. There was a time when in China they were tying women's feet. There was a reason for it. They thought that if the woman looked kind of frail and things like that, men would fall in love with them. Same thing with kimonos and all the things that women had to do, paint their faces white. I mean, they looked scary, but it was just the culture, okay? So people really mean well. And I think if we can try to understand why parents behave the way they do, that is going to really change things. And it would start with, I would say, adult literacy. Let's have some kind of community programs where people are talking to parents, teaching them how to parent, teaching them to stop cutting, portions of the female genitalia, and usually the best part, if you ask me, and stop doing all that. If they really, because most of the time, we parent the way we were parented. So if my mother got beaten for this, she's going to think, that's the way I'm supposed to treat my daughter, so let me beat the living daylights out of her, or let me put as much pepper in her as I can. It's just ignorance. So let's start with education.
Thank you so much. Another character I really love is Auntie Biggie. Yes.
In the previous, I think the MC yesterday was saying something like, rich people call their uncles or aunties Biggie. I found that very interesting. I didn't think about that when I was creating the character, but I actually, to be a confession here, I actually had an aunt that we used to call Auntie Biggie. And because she died and I liked her, I just wanted to put her in a book. So
was she also fat?
She was fat. That's why they called her Biggie. She was very fat. She was like a building. I mean, she was like a walking mattress, really. A walking mattress with a huge galley.
Okay, now I can imagine that.
Yeah.
And the face I'm seeing is Auntie Biggie's. I want to talk about Auntie Biggie in respect to mental health. So she reminds me of the kind of character that gives her all. She's there for everybody, but when it matters most, nobody's there for her. People that suffer internally with their mental health. What does Auntie Biggie represent in this novel?
I think that we have that a lot of depression. When I was at the University of Dakar, one of my best friends committed suicide. She did it on my birthday, by the way. I've always wondered if it was her way of giving me the middle finger. I don't know. But she was one of my best friends, and she was always unhappy. And I think what we do is, and I'm guilty of this, by the way, because I was one of those people that did not understand her. I would just look at her and say, okay, so you're homesick. Get over it. We're all homesick. Are you the only one who is outside the country, Not understanding that some people may be mentally more frail. And so I think there is also something about, nowadays we're talking about mental health in Africa in general, but as far as I knew when we were growing up, if you went naked on the street with your things going ding-a-ding-a-ding and looking very dirty, you were not sick. You didn't have mental issues, right? So mental problems, it's really something that is there, and people are suicidal, and people go through things, and people should have seen it coming. For instance, and I know I'm not going to give any spoilers, but if somebody is not taking showers, if somebody is spending a lot of time in bed, if somebody is acting a little unusual. If somebody who used to be lively is suddenly very quiet, or somebody who used to be very quiet now won't stop talking, or somebody's hair has gone through some drastic changes, we need to pay attention to that, because that is when you know something is wrong and we have to do something about it. But there is a thank you. But there is a stigma. I mean, people, my friend who committed suicide, what was really painful to me was that the husband knew. This girl had attempted suicide 3 times, and he didn't tell her so. And that's another thing. You don't tell anybody, even when you have a physical ailment. For goodness sake, in Ghana, I had a friend who died of breast cancer rather than let anybody know, in case there were witches who were going to do her. I mean, seriously. That is so heartbreaking. And the fact that my friend tried 3 times, and one time when they rushed her to the hospital, I was actually in an apartment across the street, and I saw this man, and he didn't tell anybody, so not even her parents. So that, in fact, eventually when she died, everybody thought the guy killed her. But it's not true. She really was seriously ill and should have been on medication or should have been in therapy. And that is what we do. And so we have somebody like Auntie Biggie, who on the surface is very normal. She's helping everybody, as you say. She's meddling in everybody's affairs. She's quarreling here. She's telling her husband to go, F off and all that. And there is something wrong with her, and nobody's paying attention. And I will not say any more about what happens to her.
Okay, thank you so much. On a lighter note.
Yeah, please.
Finally. Not finally, but like on a lighter note. When I love a book, I see the characters everywhere. I want to know if it's the same for you. For example, I see Mr. Agyekum everywhere. Essie's dad, I don't like him anywhere I see him. If you know, you know.
Okay, so do I see characters? Well, the characters that you write about invariably become real to you. And sometimes you forget that they are not real. For instance, the time that AC goes to see the nurse about getting help, sexual help,
I get it.
I can actually see the woman. When I'm writing, it's as if I'm watching a movie in my head. It's the only way I can write. So I'm trying to describe the movie for the reader. And it came about because I was about to have surgery that I didn't want to have. And I was talking to the Ghanaian doctor, and then he told me about some of the things that happened to young women who needed help, counseling, something to do with sex. And I was totally appalled that a lot of our problems were actually caused by the grown-up women who should know better. And let me tell you something. It's something I always say. I'm sorry, but we older women and those of us who one day will become parents, think about it. When we talk about female circumcision, we talk about all this treatment that women get, little girls get. Who are the people doing the punishing? It's not the men. As far as I know, no man has ever been the one to cut off any woman's private part. It's the women doing it. And so just because it happened to you doesn't mean you have to let it happen to your daughter.
Yes, I get it. And we also need to relearn and unlearn some things that we grew up with. That's just the only way to be better for the next generation. Don't you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm unlearning all the time, and I think I will stop learning when I die. Because sometimes, even with the best of intentions, you make mistakes all the time, and we have to learn. I mean, I have 2 children, and I find myself sometimes shouting, and I can hear my father's voice, and I go, "Oopsie, ouch," and then I have to backtrack, and go back and tell them I'm sorry. And by the way, it's okay to apologize to a child. Our culture says you shouldn't, but it's okay. I mean, sometimes I think I'm right, and sometimes I think I'm wrong. When I think I'm wrong, I have no problem. My students will tell you, I'm always coming back and licking my fingers and saying, I don't think I handled this one well, So, yeah.
Thank you so much. This book, Essie Comes of Age, in a time of political turmoil, what made you feel like you needed to add this aspect to the story?
Well, politics are around us. I think that, for instance, politics can force us to make all kinds of decisions. For instance, when there were, early in the 70s, I think, Nigerians were driven out of Ghana. If it weren't for politics, they wouldn't have left. Well, during the time that some left and some didn't leave, and I'm so glad some didn't leave, we have a huge population of Nigerian-Ghanaians. I actually should call them Ghanaians. They've been there since before independence. So honestly, what we did was wrong. What Ghanaians did was wrong. And a few years, decades later, Nigerians retaliated, right? So politics forces, during that time that Nigerians were forced to leave Ghana, do you imagine there were relationships that broke up? It affects our lives. It affects commerce. It affects, I found out that my great-grandmother was one of the people that was driven out of Ghana. I didn't even know she was in Ghana. Apparently she was a trader. So it affects our lives. So you see where in the story, she and her boyfriend are trying to travel to Nigeria, and look at the trouble they went through because of politics. So without understanding the politics, how will you understand why they couldn't cross the border, or why this was happening to them, or why there are soldiers involved? So I actually resisted this because I didn't want to write about politics at all. But my publisher kept coming back to me and saying, wait a minute, why was this like this? And I would say, well, it's because in that time there was Rawlings, so well, why don't you put that in? Oh. Because you see, the thing with Western countries is that they are always trying to make African writers write about our politics. And it really irritates me. But in this particular instance, it was necessary, so I had to give in and write about it, yeah, so.
Essie's character reminds me of the protagonist in Peace Medier's novel, His Only Wife. So I'd like to ask you, do you have any, people you are inspired by in the literary community, people you look up to, so to speak?
It's hard to say. I look up to just about everybody, just because there is so much I can learn from people. Like just today, I was listening to T.J. Benson, and I was floored by a lot of the things he had to say, and I haven't read his book, and I'm just going to, I told him after my session I was going to buy a copy and read. So I think that the thing that really, and I was trying to say this to some people yesterday, I probably didn't express myself well, is that I'm a nobody, completely nobody. And just by people holding my hand, I can enter the space or enter that space or enter that space. So who are the people I look up to? I look up to, there was a woman writer, Zukiswa, Iwana, who helped me a lot, and I read her book, and I was inspired. I hadn't read The Secret Lives of Babasegi's Wives, yes. But in 2018, when I came to Ake and I saw the production, I went and bought the book, and I thought, wow. And then there was this old woman, she's, the word old woman always sounds so bad, because again, when it comes to women, age is an issue. Really, the older you are, the better, okay? So all of you who are past 30, don't listen to them. You're going to get better and better as you age, trust me. Yeah, you're all going to get more beautiful and blah, 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 blah. And sexier, by the way. Women get sexier as they grow older. So she wrote a book called, she was an American, I've forgotten her name, Erica Young, and the book was Fear of Flying. And when I read the book, she was writing about taboo subjects set in the 70s, and I thought, wow, so you can write like that? So anytime I see somebody who pushes the envelope, I think, wow, so I can write like that. I love Chimamanda, obviously. I remember when I read Purple Hibiscus, I said, yes, I loved it. And so there's so many writers. Aisha Harunata Atta, if you haven't read her, please read her books. That woman is just amazing. She just keeps writing and writing and writing. She's just written a book called Zainab. And by the way, what I like about her is she's always writing about Northern cultures. And the book is called Zainab Takes New York. So if you get a chance, read it. It's a romantic comedy. And, Africans don't usually do romance well. It's not that we don't do romance well. We feel we always have to write that big novel with big English that will make people think, oh my goodness. Yeah, if you want to write literature, go ahead and write it. That will be studied by professors and whatnot. Somebody like me, I read for entertainment, so please just make it easy. So my books are easy to read. So read Aisha. There's so many other authors. Usually I have an idea, and when somebody asks me, immediately the thoughts just go out of my head. So there are probably friends of mine who are going to say, you didn't even mention my book. I swear, I love everybody. I just can't remember. So my son is a big fan of Leigh, for instance, and I used to love detective books. So when I saw Easy Motion, Taurus, I read it, and I read When Trouble Sleeps. So yeah, and Abdul Karim is right here. I just heard, he's an illustrator, but he's also a storyteller. So he writes wonderful fantasy and things like. By the way, this guy loves Game of Thrones. I don't know what is it with him. He's always talking about Game of Thrones. So yeah, so all these people and everybody else. Maza Mengistu. Oh, how could I forget her? I'm sure you've read some of her books, of course. She writes really, really deep, very intellectual, but sheer poetic books. So read her too. Yeah.
Thank you so much. We're rounding up.
Yes, please. I want them. I'm tired of talking, and I feel like such a fraud sitting here. Let them talk, so I can hide.
What do you do when you're not writing?
Oh, I play tennis. I'm always playing tennis, and I love to dance. I especially my children are threatening to disown me, but I want to make a music video. No, seriously, I'm dead serious, and nobody takes me seriously. My son always says, "Mom, your time is past. You're not hot anymore." It's very painful. How dare he? I don't care. See that song that says what? Pass me the Dutchie. Pretty girl, Kitty, yeah. Well, now I want to make a female version of that. Why shouldn't I have all kinds of handsome men dancing around me and going, "Yes, me the Dutchie, pretty boy," and have them all going, touch it. Well, I want to make one. So yeah, I sing a lot, and I annoy everybody in my neighborhood. You can hear me singing loudly and all that. So I dance, sing, play tennis, I read, and like to get together with people and try different foods and whatnot. So when I dance, I dance about 3 times a week. Tuesday, I go to African dance. Wednesday, there's an all-ladies band. If you ever come to Ghana, come to a place called Plus 233. It's an all-ladies band. Let me tell you, they're doctors, they're lawyers, whatnot, but those girls can rock it. And we dance. Yeah. And then Friday nights, I'm at the Holiday Inn by the poolside. Yeah, man. So, if you ever come to Ghana and you want to have fun, hit me up. Even if I've ever had a fight with you, listen, I have a bad memory. I'll meet you and I'll forget that you're supposed to be angry with me, and then I'll be nice to you. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure talking with you on stage. We've talked before. Just saying. Do we have any questions, please?
Yay. I feel like that lady who was hiding behind her husband yesterday. I'm better with on, I don't want to be on stage, so please ask questions so I can go away. Who said that? I'm looking at you. This girl in the previous session had her hand up, and she's there, sweet, and she was the first person to get her hand up, and nobody called her. So if you have a question, you raise your hand, I'll make sure they call you. Somebody in the back, okay. And then somebody, a gentleman in blue here, yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Is it afternoon?
Yes, it's
Okay.
afternoon.
Mine isn't necessarily a question. I just wanted to talk about how I felt reading the lead character, especially the part where you made it very realistic that this was a child speaking and describing heavy subjects that they cannot completely comprehend. I love it when writers tend to take into consideration the characters, their age, and I just felt like, okay, this is definitely what this child would understand from what he had pictured. And that just took me and then made me read the book, because I just loved that. And during your section with Zukiswa, it was something that also drew me to having a copy that I eventually won as a giveaway. Yeah, so I just wanted to say thank you for that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. The gentleman in blue. And then there's somebody else. Is there somebody I missed?
Yeah.
Who say now you have a question? Good. We'll come
Good
to
day
you.
once more. Ma'am,
day.
you are a nice person. I like how you made your expressions. Ma'am, what I want to ask is there any advice you can give to young writers, those that want to be writers, sort of advice on how to come about it? Thank you.
Okay. So this is actually a good question, and I'll try to make it brief. To me, as I said, if you're a writer, you write, that makes you a writer. However, if you want somebody to pay money for what you write, you need to respect them. And so you need to sharpen your skill. And how do you do that? Read a lot. Read a variety of books, okay? Don't just read the type of things you like to read, like say detective stories or romance or adventures or whatnot. Read nonfiction, read newspapers, read essays, read. Because reading, it's kind of like an athlete that needs fuel, right? You read, and as you read, you start to notice the things that work. You notice what you don't like about what this writer did. You ask yourself, why didn't I like this? Was the pacing too slow or too fast? Was the vocabulary appropriate? Was that person's language just too heavy? Basically, when you read, you will find the kind of story that you want to tell, because what you don't like to read, you wouldn't write it for anybody else. So read a lot. The second thing I would say is that start small. And I shared this with the Kashim Fellows the other day. Was it yesterday or the day before yesterday? I don't remember. But here is the thing. Many people want to just start off and write that huge book. Of course, what you don't realize is that by the time that person writes that huge book, the person has been writing short stories. Nobody ever pays attention to your short stories unless you've written them as a collection, like a Broken People's Playlist. Oh, I forgot Chimeka, one of my favorite writers.
I love him.
You see? So you don't know that that person has been writing. Maybe I published just one short story. That was my story that I wrote that was picked up and published by McSweeney's, right? And through that, somebody read it and approached me and said, hey, I would like to represent you. So be willing to start small. Be willing to make friends. Now, sometimes I come across as being very, almost a little too much. What I mean is that, like I told some people yesterday, I will talk to a bottle if that bottle will respond. I will talk to anybody. So don't be afraid to approach people. Sometimes you approach them with outlandish ideas, and the ideas may not be good, but they may give you other ideas. So if you write, share your writing. When I was in school, my writing was like the newspaper of the day, because my diary, everybody read my diary. My diary was not the kind of diary that you write about your deep secrets and you hope nobody will read it and you develop a code language, use some numbers and put a padlock on it. Oh no. My diary was just describing the day's events. So everything that happened in class that was funny, I was great at cartooning my teachers and giving them good nicknames and making them this real caricatures, writing poems about them, and everybody came to class. Oh, what did you write today? What did you write today? Because I write to entertain. So if you just keep writing, don't think about publication. If you think about publication, you know what you're going to do? You're going to think, oh my God, what will my father think of this? What will my mother think of this? Just keep writing.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Hussein Asfian Ahmed. Firstly, I'm going to say thank you for being very friendly and calm. I didn't even know you were the next guest. Now, I just want to make a comment and end it with a question. Now, my comment is on the summary in the book. I've not read the book. I've not read fiction for like 2 years. It's very intentional.
Shame on you. Shame
No,
on you.
it's very, very, very intentional.
Okay.
Yes, I've been trying to build myself in terms of article writing, so I've not read fiction in 2 years. Now, in the summary in the book, there is a reawakening of feminism, and aside the feminism, there is this tendency of a story of a young girl from somewhere who tends to know a little bit about her personality and grew up to be someone better or someone that she wants to be. Now, in cases of stories like this, which is also a similar story to my personal life, you always have someone from your personal family who was a very big motivation, or you don't have at all. Or you always have someone somewhere that is your motivation. Now, my question is, who is your biggest motivation amongst your loved ones? I don't think I had that. Thank you.
And you're probably not going to like this, but it's my father. My father, was a little bit, you take the best of AC's father, and I'll say that is my father. My father always encouraged me to think for myself, always encouraged me to write. The very first time I wrote something, I think I was about 5 years old, and I wrote it in my language. My father sat down and corrected me and helped me, and he was very gentle and just gave me a lot of confidence. So yeah, my father. There are good men, lots of good men, okay? And so let's bear that in mind. Yeah, you. Hello? Your hand is up. Yeah. Sorry, I forget. I'm not the moderator. I'm not supposed to do that, right?
Okay. So, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Wisdom Patrick. I have a question to ask. At a point in your life or at a point in your career, was there ever a time when you wanted to, this writing thing, let me just stop it, due to challenges or occasions that occurred in your life? Was there ever a time when you felt like leaving the writing thing to just be?
Yeah, I think I would say publication.
Yeah.
It has to do with this very book. When, I got the short story out, I got a deal with Simon & Schuster, and it was the same editor that bought Chimamanda's Half of a Yellow Sun. And I was very, very excited. And then, before I knew what, that editor was laid off, and the contract was canceled. And I was brokenhearted. I really was very upset, because up until this time, I never worried about publication, because I had a good job. I loved my job. I loved what I was doing. And if I had never been published, I would have been okay. But once I had the chance to get published, I got excited, and I started to think, oh my God, I can do this and that and that. And then suddenly it was taken away from me. It's kind of like somebody giving you dinner and then it gets taken away from you. So, but instead of quitting, I didn't really feel like quitting. I felt like quitting American publishing. What I did was I sent my book to Farafina, and they took it up. And so that's another thing that I was trying to tell people about flexibility. Don't be so stuck on getting this big deal or that deal. I'm just a storyteller. Money was not what I was worrying about. So I said, the heck with American publishing. Let me come to Africa, to my own people. And of course, once they published it, then guess who came calling? HarperCollins. African publishers are doing great job. Give it up to Ouida Books. Somebody else. I'm sorry. You are. That was the second question. Please let somebody else go. When we finish, if there's time. Yeah, that gentleman. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mustafa Fatika. As a writer, do you normally use to visualize the behavior of the character when writing, or used to just picture the behavior of someone and make a story of it?
Yeah.
And my second question is that, how do you feel when you are writing?
Well, I think I can answer both with just one answer. There was a woman who was in the panel earlier on in the morning. I think it was the first panel, talking about acting and feeling the same way. Like my second book, there is a mother who goes through something that is so painful, and that is coming out in March. So hint, hint, hint. But I have to feel it in order to be able to describe it well. I have to imagine myself. I think writing is very hard for me because of that, because I'm a very emotional person. I take it so personally. Sometimes I cry and I have to just leave the computer because I'm in a very, very sad state. And that is why I like a little more comedy, because then I can be happy all the time, yeah.
Thank you. You? Do we have any other questions?
There's a lady in the back. Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Nana Firdausi Zakaria. Okay, as a writer, there are many times when you're working on a story and you get stuck. And you always have this burning passion to continue, but you cannot just get to the end. So I want to know, how do you handle writer's block so that you can continue the piece you've started working on? Thank you.
I have to say, I've been writing since, before I became a fiction writer, published fiction writer, I used to be a journalist. And in journalism, you don't have the luxury of having a writer's block. When the story is due, it's due. I think, Grace, you're a media person, I think. You know what it is like. When the story is due, the story is due. You don't have that luxury. So that was great training for me. And I like to, and I think it's a bit of bragging, and I apologize for that, but I never miss a deadline. If my story is due, my deadline, I'm going to finish 2 days before the deadline. So I don't have the luxury. I have to write. The other thing, too, is that I will write even if I don't feel like writing. And as you keep writing, if you go back and look at what you wrote the next day, you're going to discover a lot of rubbish. But within that rubbish, you're also going to discover nuggets of good stuff, and you're going to be able to pick it up. So I think it's only recently that I've had what you can call writer's block, and that's because for the first time in my life, I'm writing historical fiction. And I've done so much research, and the story is just so dear to my heart. I've put myself through a lot of emotional things. I've been to the dungeon where this woman was kept. I've allowed myself to be locked inside just to feel what she was feeling. And I want to get the story so right that I have put too much pressure on myself. Usually, I don't take myself too seriously. I mean, I just write, but in this particular instance, I've put so much pressure on myself that it's making me not write freely, and that is not good. And I have to take my own advice. Stop obsessing about perfection. Just write the darn story. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions, please?
Yeah, Papi, we're actually going to finish in time.
Okay.
You can ask another question. Somebody raise a hand.
Last one, the last question.
I'm so happy because I'm looking at the time and going, yay, they don't have to tell us.
My question goes to Madam Bisi this way. As a writer who lives in Ghana and America as well, how does these two locations give you maybe some basic insights and idea of experience in your writings? Thank you.
How does it give me insight? I never thought about it. I guess maybe location is just location, right? And of course, when I'm writing something that is based in Ghana, what I find is that I have to be very careful that I don't throw in any Americanism. And I have to, because I wrote The Teller of Secrets completely in America, so I had to keep making myself be in Ghana through my head, through my imagination, which is why I only described locations that I knew. My second book, I wrote in Ghana, and yet about 2/3 of it is based in America. So again, I have to rely on memory, on my emotion. I have to transpose myself there and try to imagine, try to smell. And sometimes I just call a friend and start chatting just so I can remember what things were like. And then I send it to an American friend and send it to Ghanaian friends. So I think what gives me insight here is that when I'm writing, I feel as if I'm better able to explain Americans to Africans, and at the same time, oh my goodness, how I hate having to do it. I feel it's so insulting having to explain Africans to Americans. It really frustrates me, but somebody has to do it because there are such prejudices. By the way, have you heard the latest brouhaha about The Little Mermaid, the movie that's coming out? Because the Little Mermaid is not blonde or blue-haired. Give me a break. Don't they know that we have Mami Water? In every culture, in Asia, everywhere. It makes me think that those creatures are probably real. It's in every culture, and yet they are having. And so, for the first time, and I don't like to fight on Twitter, I actually avoid Twitter because I'm a coward, really, frankly. I don't want anybody to come after me, but today I actually tweeted. Essie's father, in The Teller of Secrets, Essie's father talks about meeting a mermaid, and Essie wants to know.
2.
No, 24 seconds. No, 22 seconds. It's easier. We have a clock here. No, I'm joking. But yeah, we should stop. I mean, it is 16 seconds, but you are right. Time is winding down. But yeah, so I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.